"What are you doing there?" The restaurant owner's voice came from the doorway. The waitress froze, a spoon suspended halfway to her mouth. In her hands was a small plastic box with a few slices of cold meat and scraps of bread left by customers. She stood up quickly, head bowed. "I'm sorry, sir. I just wanted to take it home for my mother." The other staff snickered, waiting for the usual outburst. But he just looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Sit down. Eat. The food's still good." The kitchen went silent. The man everyone feared for his temper now reached out, placing a piece of bread gently into her box. "Next time, if you're hungry, tell me. Don't hide." No one knew the same man had been quietly paying her mother's hospital bills for months. Kayla Wintron stood there, her hands trembling slightly as she closed the plastic box. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on her plain black apron and faded sneakers. She didn't look up, not at Ronan Edivane, the owner, or at the other staff who'd gone quiet. Her hair tied back in a loose bun, slipped a few dark strands brushing her cheek. She tucked them behind her ear with a quick practice motion, like someone used to keeping herself out of the way. The air in the room felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for her to say something else to explain herself. But she didn't. She just nodded once, sharp and small, and turned back to the counter, wiping it down with a rag like nothing had happened. The other waitresses exchanged glances, their smirks fading when Ronan didn't leave. He stood there, arms crossed, watching her work. Ronan left his silence ringing louder than any shouted threat. The kitchen staff, who had been ready for drama, exchanged confused, disappointed looks. Kayla turned back to her counter, but her movements were shadowed. Mira, still standing by the prep table, didn't bother to lower her voice. "What a performance," she scoffed, picking up a glistening truffle oil bottle and examining her reflection in it. "Playing the starving saint. We all know her mother's situation is just an excuse to skive off." Selrick chuckled from the side, loud enough for Kayla to hear every syllable. "Poor Kayla. She thinks one act of pity means she's family. Just wait till inventory hits. If a single olive is missing, she'll be the first on the street." The hostility in the room was a tangible thing. A heavy cloud of judgment that contrasted sharply with the expensive scent of saffron and butter. Kayla took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the spotless stainless steel she was polishing. She knew this quiet malice was worse than Ronan's temper. It was systemic. She gripped the rag tighter, turning the perceived slight into a silent, steely resolve that no one in that brightly lit, privileged kitchen could possibly recognize or break. It was late past closing at Orland's Table, a restaurant so fancy the menus didn't even list prices. The kind of place where people dropped hundreds on a single plate of food and left half of it untouched. Kayla was wiping down the last of the counters when Mira Kinth sauntered back into the kitchen. Mira, with her tight blonde ponytail and glossy nails, always looked like she belonged on a magazine cover, not carrying trays. She stopped short when she saw Kayla's plastic box still sitting on the counter. "Oh my God," Mira said, her voice loud enough to bounce off the stainless steel. "Are you seriously eating customer leftovers? That's disgusting." She didn't wait for an answer, just whipped out her phone, her acrylics clicking on the screen. "This is going viral." Before Kayla could move, Selrick Doran, the night manager, pushed through the swinging doors. Selrick was all sharp suits and sharper grins, the kind of guy who'd kiss up to Ronan while stepping on everyone else. "What's going on?" he asked, but his eyes were already on Kayla's box. He laughed a short, mean bark. "You're kidding me." Stealing scraps now, he pulled out his own phone, aiming it at her. "Smile, Kayla. This is going straight to Mr. Edivane." Kayla's hands stopped moving on the counter. She looked at him, her face calm, but her fingers curled tightly around the rag. "It's not stealing," she said quietly. "It was going to be thrown out." That's when Ronan walked in. He'd been in his office probably going over numbers, but something had brought him back to the kitchen. His presence sucked the air out of the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked carved from stone, he didn't need to raise his voice to make people flinch. He looked at Kayla, then at the box, then at Selrick's phone still recording. "What's this?" he asked, his tone flat but heavy. Selrick started to explain, but Mira cut in, her voice dripping with fake pity. "She's eating garbage, Mr. Edivane. Like actual trash from the plates." Ronan's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, looking down at Kayla, who still hadn't moved. "If you're that desperate," he said, his voice low, "I'll dock your pay this week. Call it a cleaning fee for the mess you're making of my kitchen." The room went colder. Kayla's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. She just nodded again, picked up her box, and slipped it into her bag. "Understood, sir," she said, her voice steady, and walked out. The next morning, Mira's video was everywhere. She'd posted it to the staff's private group chat, but it didn't stay private. By noon, it was on social media, tagged with Orland's table and waitress eating trash. People in the comments laughed, called Kayla pathetic, dirty, a thief. Kayla didn't see it. She was at the hospital sitting by her mother's bed. The room smelled like antiseptic and old flowers. Her mom, Ellen, was asleep, her face pale and thin under the fluorescent lights. Kayla opened the plastic box and set out the bread and meat on a napkin. She broke the bread into small pieces, her hands moving carefully like she was handling something precious. Ellen stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "You didn't have to bring that," she said, her voice weak. Kayla smiled just a little. "It's good food, Mom. Eat." Ellen took a small bite, and Kayla watched her face softening for the first time all night. Outside in the hospital hallway, Eldon Voren stopped short. He was there to visit a friend, but his eyes caught on Kayla through the glass door. Eldon, with his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, carried himself like a professor, which he had been before he became the country's top food critic. He recognized Kayla instantly, his star student from years ago, the one who'd won a national scholarship for her culinary talent. She'd disappeared from school without a word. Now here she was, looking worn and small, feeding her mother scraps in a hospital room. He didn't approach her. He just watched, his brow furrowing, and started to wonder what had happened to her. Eldon Voren walked slowly back to his car, the fluorescent light of the hospital lobby fading behind him. The image of Kayla, thin and weary, dividing meager scraps for her ailing mother, replayed relentlessly in his mind. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old contacts until he found the number for Ronan Edavane, pausing just before calling. He remembered the Orland sauce competition clearly, the intense flavor profile, the complex construction that only a true culinary prodigy could execute. He knew with a certainty that chilled him that Kayla had been robbed. This wasn't just a former student falling on hard times. This was a tragedy of ambition derailed by corporate greed. Eldon canceled the call, deciding against a direct confrontation. Instead, he made a detour to the archives of the Culinary Guild, determined to pull the original signed submission forms and the confidentiality agreements. He needed irrefutable proof, not just a hunch, to take down an empire built on stolen genius, knowing full well this investigation could cost him his own reputation and career. But he felt a profound professional obligation to the broken young woman he'd just seen. 3 days later, Orland's table was buzzing. They were hosting a big event to launch a new menu, the kind of night where critics, influencers, and rich regulars filled the dining room. Kayla was supposed to be in the kitchen, but Selric had other plans. "You're on cleanup tonight," he told her, pointing to the outdoor patio. "Can't have you near the food after that stunt." Kayla didn't argue. She grabbed a broom and headed outside, where a cold drizzle was starting to fall. Her uniform, a simple black dress, clung to her as the rain picked up. She kept sweeping, her movement steady, even as her hair stuck to her face. Inside, the event was in full swing, all crystal glasses and loud laughter. Eldon Voren was there, seated near the window, his notebook open. He glanced outside and saw Kayla standing alone in the wet, her broom moving slowly. His pen stopped moving. A reporter, a young guy with a slick haircut and too much cologne, leaned toward Ronan during the event. "Hey, Mr. Edavane, what's the deal with that viral video? Your waitress eating leftovers." The room quieted, all eyes on Ronan. He set down his glass, his face unreadable. "People like that don't represent Orland's table," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "We have standards." The crowd chuckled, some clapping lightly. The reporter grinned, his camera swinging toward the window, catching Kayla in the frame. She didn't look up, but her grip on the broom tightened, her knuckles white. A woman at a nearby table, draped in a designer dress, leaned to her friend and whispered, "She looks like she crawled out of a dumpster." The friend laughed loud enough for it to carry outside. Kayla's shoulders stiffened, but she kept sweeping. "Standards," she said under her breath, so quiet no one heard. The flash of the reporter's camera, momentarily freezing Kayla in the rain-swept window frame, felt like a physical slap across the dining room. The snickers and whispers from the lavishly dressed patrons grew louder, fueled by Ronan's cold confirmation of her low status. Amidst the cruel laughter, a young prep cook named Leo, who had always respected Kayla's quiet efficiency, felt a surge of righteous anger. He started forward, a tray of polished silverware rattling in his hands, intending to go outside and offer her his own coat, or perhaps just a word of solidarity. But Selrick, who had been observing the drama from the kitchen entrance with a look of smug satisfaction, moved like a striking snake. He intercepted Leo with a casual, devastating bump, sending the heavy tray of silver crashing onto the marble floor with a deafening clamor. "Clumsy idiot," Selrick hissed, his smile never faltering as he leaned down. "Clean that up now, or you'll be out there sweeping trash with your friend Kayla. We maintain standards here. Remember, no distractions, especially not pathetic little acts of rebellion." Leo, face white with shame and fear, immediately dropped to his knees, knowing a single glance at Ronan would confirm Selrick's threat, leaving Kayla completely isolated and exposed to the public scorn. Eldon couldn't sit still anymore. He excused himself and slipped out to the storage room behind the kitchen, where he knew Kayla would go to drop off the broom. When she walked in shaking rain off her sleeves, he was waiting. "Kayla," he said, his voice gentle but firm. She froze, her eyes flicking up to meet his. "The new sauce they're serving tonight," he said. "The Orland sauce. That's yours, isn't it?" Kayla's face didn't change, but her hands shook as she set the broom against the wall. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice wavered just for a second. Eldon stepped closer. "I was your professor, Kayla. I remember your work. That sauce, it's the one you submitted for the national competition." Kayla looked away, her jaw tight. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Eldon knew. Years ago, Kayla had been at the top of her culinary class. She'd created a sauce so unique, it won her a full scholarship. She'd submitted it to a national contest judged by a panel that included a younger Ronan Edivane back when he was still building his empire. Kayla's project was supposed to be confidential, but after she dropped out to care for her mom, the sauce showed up on Orland's menu. Kayla had seen it listed one night, months into her job as a waitress. She'd stood there staring at the menu, her hands shaking so hard she dropped a tray. She never said a word about it. Not to Ronan, not to anyone. But now Eldon was holding a folder old and creased with her name on it. "I kept your submission," he said, "and Ronan's signature is on it." Kayla's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to him. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice low. Eldon didn't answer right away. He just handed her the folder and walked away. The next week, trouble came fast. A health inspection team showed up unannounced, their clipboards out and their faces serious. Selrick led them through the kitchen, all smiles, until they reached the fridge Kayla was responsible for. He opened it, and there, tucked behind a tray of vegetables, was a bag of rotting food scraps. The inspector's pen started moving. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice sharp. Selrick put on a shocked face, shaking his head. "I had no idea," he said, glancing at Kayla, who was standing nearby, her face blank. Mira, hovering by the counter, smirked. "Some people just don't care about hygiene," she said loudly. The inspector looked at Kayla, who was wiping her hands on her apron. "You're in charge of this area?" the inspector asked. Kayla nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Ronan, who'd been called in, didn't hesitate. "She's done," he said, his voice like a slammed door. "Pack your things, Kayla." Kayla didn't flinch. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the counter. The kitchen was silent, everyone watching as she picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Just before she left, she turned to Selrick. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing to a smear on the counter. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like a knife. Selrick's face went red, but he didn't say a word. Kayla walked out her steps, steady her head high. The inspectors kept writing, but one of them, a younger woman, watched Kayla go, her expression uneasy. Kayla stood still, her folded apron resting like a period at the end of a long, miserable sentence. The inspectors were busy taking notes, and Ronan had already turned his back, discussing logistics with the head chef. Before picking up her bag, Kayla cast a slow, deliberate glance around the kitchen, her eyes settling briefly on Selrick's pristine station, the one he guarded, obsessively boasting about its perfect organization. She reached into her discarded apron pocket and pulled out the small, tightly wadded-up plastic wrap she had carefully retrieved from the inside of the rotten food bag Selrick had planted. With a swift, almost imperceptible motion, she rubbed the wrap against a small, unseen spot on the handle of the primary walk-in refrigerator, a high-touch surface only Selrick and the managers used for inventory access. The microscopic transfer of bacteria, undetectable, now would be enough to trip the secondary, more sensitive hygiene swabs the inspectors always performed, on exit placing the true source of contamination, not with her, but with the management's shared equipment. She gave a faint, almost invisible curve to her lip, the only physical evidence of her calculated defiance, and walked out, leaving a ticking time bomb of proof behind her. A week later, the story broke. Culinary World, the biggest food magazine in the country, published an article titled, "Who Really Created Orland's Sauce?" The piece included scans of Kayla's original submission, complete with her handwritten notes and Ronan's signature as a judge. Eldon had sent them everything. He went on record, his voice steady, in the interview. "I was there when Kayla submitted her work," he said. Ronan Edevane approved it. He knew who she was. The internet exploded. Hashtags like #JusticeForKayla trended for days. Customers canceled reservations at Orland's table. Protesters showed up outside the restaurant holding signs with Kayla's name. Ronan stayed silent, locked in his office, scrolling through the comments. One post stopped him cold. A photo of Kayla at the hospital feeding her mother. He stared at it, his hands frozen on the keyboard. Ronan stood alone in his dark office, the harsh blue light of his monitor illuminating his face, tracking the public execution of his reputation. He wasn't looking at the damning financial figures or the canceled reservations. He was staring, utterly mesmerized, at the viral photo of Kayla at the hospital feeding her mother. It wasn't the image of poverty that broke him. It was the date stamp. He recognized the specific room number, the distinctive faded floral wallpaper in the background. That photo had been taken just 3 days after he had publicly berated her and docked her pay 3 days after he had stood there and watched her walk out with her stolen dignity. More crushing was the realization that he, Ronan Edevane, had personally authorized the monthly bank transfers to that exact hospital for Ellen's care, quietly ensuring the expensive treatment continued. He had been her anonymous benefactor and her cruelest tormentor, simultaneously publicly humiliating the very person he was privately trying to save. He slammed his fist silently onto the mahogany desk, the noise absorbed by the thick carpet, a soundless scream of profound self-loathing at the grotesque hypocrisy of his actions. Kayla didn't see the article right away. She was at home sorting through medical bills when her phone started buzzing. She ignored it at first, but the calls kept coming. Finally, she picked up. It was Eldon. "Check the news," he said. She opened her laptop, and there it was. Her name, her sauce, her story. She sat back, her hands in her lap, staring at the screen. Her mother, sitting nearby, reached for her hand. "You did good, baby," she said, her voice soft. Kayla squeezed her hand but didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The truth was out there now, and it wasn't her job to make people believe it. Ronan called her back to the restaurant a few days later. He said it was to talk things over. Kayla walked in dressed differently this time. No apron, no sneakers. She wore a simple black dress, her hair loose, her posture straight. Selrick and Mira were there too, standing behind Ronan, like kids caught cheating on a test. Selrick spoke first, his voice loud and shaky. "You set us up," he said, pointing at Kayla. "You faked being poor to make us look bad." Mira nodded, her arms crossed. "She's just chasing clout," she said, her voice dripping with venom. Kayla didn't respond. She just set a folder on the table, the same one Eldon had given her. She opened it to a page with Ronan's signature and slid it toward him. "You sign this," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Ronan's eyes flicked to the paper, then to her. He didn't say a word. The folder held more than just her submission. There was a contract buried in the fine print of the competition rules from years ago. Kayla pointed to a single line. "The creator of any utilized recipe retains 30% of profits from its commercial use." Ronan's face went pale. He'd built his empire on that sauce, and now the math was catching up. $12 million in royalties owed to Kayla. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Selrick started to stammer something, but Kayla cut him off. "I don't want the money," she said, her voice steady. "I want a foundation. Meals for mothers, free food for families who can't afford it." She closed the folder and stepped back. "That's all." The stunning revelation of the $12 million royalty figure sucked all the air from the room, leaving Selrick and Mira gasping like landed fish. As Kayla outlined her demand for the foundation, Selrick, his face a mask of panic and disbelief, lunged forward. "You can't!" he shrieked, making a desperate grab for the folder on the table, aiming to snatch the contract and shred it, eliminating the physical proof. Ronan, still frozen by the window, didn't move. But Kayla reacted with ice-cold speed and precision, honed by months of suppressing physical exhaustion. She slammed her palm down flat on the folder just before Selrick's grasping fingers reached it, securing the documents completely. Then, without taking her eyes from Ronan, she delivered a single sharp kick with the toe of her formal shoe, a movement unseen by Ronan, but felt acutely by Selrick right into the manager's shin. Selrick cried out, stumbling back a step, and clutching his leg, the momentum of his frantic failing assault completely broken. Mira recoiled, her false confidence evaporating, as she realized this quiet, dismissed waitress was now operating with a steely, non-negotiable command that rendered their petty bullying completely irrelevant. Ronan didn't speak. He just stared at the folder, his hands flat on the table. Then slowly he stood and walked to the window. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time he looked small. "I didn't know," he said, his voice barely audible. He turned to her, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Kayla." He sank to his knees right there in the middle of the restaurant. The cameras outside caught it all, the flashes lighting up the windows. Kayla didn't move. She just nodded once and walked out. Mira and Selrick stood frozen, their faces pale, knowing the world was watching. The backlash came fast. Mira and Selrick didn't let it go quietly. They went online posting everywhere that Kayla had played them, that she'd pretended to be poor to gain sympathy. "She's a fraud." Mira wrote her posts, racking up thousands of likes from people who didn't know better. Selrick did an interview with a shady blog, claiming Kayla had planned the whole thing to ruin Ronan. The media split. Some outlets stood by Kayla, others ran with the drama, calling her a master manipulator. Kayla's mom had to move hospitals when reporters started showing up, snapping photos through the windows. Kayla stopped answering her phone. She didn't go online. She just kept showing up at the hospital, sitting by her mom's bed, reading to her from an old cookbook they used to love, driven by a gut-wrenching need to regain some sliver of integrity before the complete collapse of his empire. Ronan finally emerged from his silence. He held an impromptu tense press conference in the deserted dining room of Orland's table, the camera lights harsh on his drawn face. Before any journalist could ask about the $12 million or the foundation, Ronan delivered a prepared statement, his voice ragged with genuine pain. "I misled the public and the press," he admitted, looking directly into the primary lens. "Kayla Wintron is the creator of the Orland sauce, and I profited from her genius. I apologize without reservation for taking credit for her work and for my callous treatment of her." He took full painful responsibility for the theft and the public humiliation. However, he stopped short of naming Selrick or Mira, attempting to absorb the remaining organizational shame himself. But even as he was speaking, Eldon Voren, still working quietly in the background, was already sending the final packet of proof: Selrick's emails, Mira's fake account login data, and the forensic report detailing the planted evidence to a different global investigative news agency, ensuring that the full scope of the malicious conspiracy would be revealed regardless of Ronan's incomplete confession. One night, Kayla was walking home when she passed a diner, the kind with flickering neon signs and sticky tables. She stopped, staring at a family inside, a mom cutting up food for her kids, laughing. Kayla's hand went to her bag, where she still carried that old plastic box. She stood there for a long time, her breath fogging in the cold air, then kept walking. The next day, a new article dropped, this one with leaked emails from Selrick, admitting he'd planted the food scraps during the inspection. Mira's posts were traced back to a fake account she'd used to spread lies. The internet turned again, this time against them. Selrick was fired from his new job at another restaurant. Mira's modeling gig with a luxury brand fell through when the company saw the backlash. Kayla didn't comment. She didn't need to. 3 months later, Orland's table was gone. In its place was a new sign: Kayla's Kitchen Meals for Mothers Foundation. The restaurant had been reborn as a nonprofit serving free meals to families in need. Ronan was there working in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables. He didn't talk much, just kept his head down, focused on the work. Selrick and Mira were long gone, their names barely mentioned anymore. The opening night was packed not with critics or influencers, but with families' kids running around, moms hugging Kayla like they had known her forever. Eldon was there too, standing by the door, his eyes misty as he cut the ribbon. Kayla walked in with her mom, who was stronger now, her smile bright. They sat at a table near the window, sharing a plate of food Kayla had made herself. Ronan came over carrying a tray of fresh bread. He set it down and looked at Kayla, his voice quiet. "You taught me something money can't buy," he said. She looked up at him, her eyes steady, and nodded. The The room was full of noise, kids laughing plates, clinking people talking, but for a moment it was just them. Kayla reached for her mom's hand, squeezing it gently. The world had tried to break her, but she'd built something better instead. She didn't need to say it. Everyone could see it. The aroma of fresh herbs and roasting vegetables filled the brightly lit space, a sharp, clean scent replacing the heavy pretense of the old Orleans table. Kayla stood near the pass, her attention momentarily pulled away from the flow of meals by a woman clutching the hands of two small children. The mother, dressed in a faded but clean jacket, had tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "My son," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, pointing to a boy who was happily devouring a bowl of hearty stew. "He hasn't had a proper hot meal like this with real meat and vegetables since I lost my job 3 months ago. You have no idea what this means to us. It's a lifeline." Kayla stepped closer, her hand resting briefly on the woman's shoulder. She didn't offer platitudes or talk about the past. She simply looked at the joy on the boy's face as he reached for a slice of Ronan's freshly baked bread. That simple, visceral image, the genuine unbought hunger satisfied by her own creation, was the only validation she ever truly needed. It was proof that her battle, the humiliation, the years of silence, had bought this specific, beautiful communal moment of healing and sustenance. You've been through it, haven't you? Felt the sting of being judged, of being pushed down. Kayla's story isn't just hers, it's yours too. You kept going, even when it hurt. You weren't wrong to hold on. You were never alone. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.